rules and principles of human conduct. While deciding in what way we should act in a given situation involving moral choice, we usually follow certain rules of conduct, which are approved by the culture we live in. For example, we follow rules such as those given as under: never take a human life, never cause needless pain and suffering to others, don't engage in sexual activity outside marriage, always turn the other cheek when you have been injured on one cheek, don't steal, always honor your parents, never tell a lie, etc. A reflection will show that none of the above-mentioned rules is a complete guide to human conduct. These rules tell you what to do, but they do not tell why we should follow them. What we need to know is a moral principle or a set of moral principles from which such rules follow. We need to understand general principles of conduct, which prescribe what one should do in all circumstances. There are several theories of conduct that attempt to state such principles from which certain rules of conduct would follow as special cases. Some of such theories have been discussed in the following sections. Theories of conduct. Universalizability. In its simplest form, universalizability means that in behaving with others, you should act in such a way that the rule of your action becomes a universal law. A similar precept of ethics is contained in the Golden Rule of Christianity. Do unto others as you would have them done unto you. It implies that if you want to be fairly treated by others, you should always treat others fairly. If you want others to help you when you are in trouble, you should always help others when they are in need of your help. The intent of this theory is to make no exception. Don't expect a kind of special treatment from others, if you are not ready to give similar treatment to them. In other words, it is a rule of impartiality and reciprocity. Nevertheless, such a rule of impartiality does not tell you what is right or wrong. It just tells you that if certain conduct is wrong for others to do, it is also wrong for you to do, provided the circumstances in both the cases are sufficiently similar, or similar in relevant aspects. The categorical imperative. Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, while working on moral principles, set forth certain moral principles, which one can unconditionally follow. These principles are called the categorical imperatives, i.e., principles that one ought to always follow. One such imperative, which is similar to the Golden Rule of Christianity, is stated here: so act that you could wish the maxim of your action to become a universal law of human conduct. If, for example, you decide to break a promise or an agreement, because it is no longer convenient or relevant for you to keep it, the maxim of your action is: break an agreement or a promise, if it is no longer convenient or relevant. Yet a more positive maxim, which is more desirable to universalize, may be: you should help others when they are in trouble. Another possible maxim may be: because I don't help others and leave them alone, when they are in trouble, they need not help me, and may leave me alone, when I am in trouble. Both these maxims are possible, but the categorical imperative does not tell us which rule we should follow. The requirement of impartiality, however, is compatible with both of these. We can hold that the principle of impartiality is undoubted a necessary condition, but it is not a sufficient condition. Rationality and morality. To remedy the situation we have just discussed, Hegel, who held that for behavior to be called morally good or desirable, it must of necessity be rational. While defining rationality of behavior in the context of moral conduct, Hegel defined it in terms of I. Logical coherence or consistency, e. Generation of universals, e. Empirical evidence in support of the generalization, and iv. Public intelligibility. According to the first condition of rationality, it is necessary that a set of moral beliefs or rules that we follow should be internally consistent. It is, for example, not rational for me to believe that others should cooperate with me or should take care of any interest, at the same time accept that I must respect others' interests. On the other hand, it will be equally consistent or coherent if I believe that others need not respect my interest, just as I don't respect theirs. Many people in this world live life according to the latter principle. We may not like their values, but we can't call them inconsistent, incoherent or irrational. The second condition, criterion of rationality is concerned with generation of universals or with general principles. According to this condition, I must not own a principle today and another tomorrow, unless these are cogent reasons for such a change. The idea of rational morality entails that our behavior should be in accordance with certain principles always unless these are valid reasons. The third condition necessitates empirical evidence or good reasons for what we do. That is, behavior for which no valid reason or empirical evidence can be put forth, is not a rational behavior. According to fourth condition, to be truly rational, our behavior should be publicly intelligible or acceptable. Use of idiosyncratic reasons, which are peculiarly personal, cannot designate behavior to be rational. For example, use of defense mechanism viz. Rationalization wherein the individual employing reasons which are not true, to justify one's behavior, is not rationality but only rationalization. Such reasons are not publicly intelligible because they are false. Nevertheless, we must remember that rationality of behavior provides only the form, or the language of morality, not its content or literature of it. That is, it cannot provide us a set of moral principles that we need to follow in our lives. It simply states that whatever moral principle we follow should satisfy the four criteria, conditions of rationality. Ethical egoism. To answer the question, what rule should guide our conduct, the ethical egoist considers one's own long-term advantage as the guiding principle. The promotion of one's long-term advantage is what one should aim at. People may differ about what course of action is to be taken for the long-term advantage, but once it is clearly known that a certain course of action will serve one's long-term interest more than any other, it is chosen. Under the concept of ethical egoism, at least, two shades of meanings have been associated by different thinkers from time to time. These are Epicureanism and rational self-interest. These have been described below. Epicureanism. In ancient times, the principal exponents of ethical egoism were the Greek Epicureans, who held that one should live one's life in such a way so as to get more pleasure in life, because pleasure for them is the sole good. In Indian culture also, in the ancient past, there was a school of thought called Charvak, which almost had the same philosophy of life. This hedonistic school of Indian philosophy is now obsolete at the conceptual level. According to proponents of Charvak, the stumum bonum, the ultimate good, is the immediate personal gratification and happiness or pleasure. The past is gone and the future never comes. Every moment is a present moment and must be enjoyed to its full. By living unhappy life, we cannot even think of a happy future. Unlike the Charvaks, however, the Epicureans had definite ideas about how each person's maximum pleasure could be achieved. According to them, one should not indulge in excessive food and drink or in personal relations. One should eat and drink what is necessary for maintenance of life, because any excessive indulgence will cause disturbance to one's health, which is bound to result in unhappiness. Similarly, close relationship may result in heartbreaks when there is betrayal. Hence, one should not become attached to anything, whether material or personal, that one is likely to lose and is outside one's control. One should live life in a detached manner. Indeed, the Epicurean ethics is not so much a formula for achieving pleasure as for avoiding displeasure. One could hold that a life of involvement in human affairs and personal relationships result in more unhappiness than a life of calm withdrawal and disinterested observation. Rational self-interest. Ayn Rand's Ethics, 2007, states that the standard by which one judges what is good or evil is man's life, that which is required for man's survival as man. She also maintained that man is an end in himself. So man's moral purpose is the achievement of own rational self-interest. In social relations, man should neither sacrifice himself for others, nor sacrifice others for himself. His rationality demands that just as one has a right to her ontological freedom, others do have such a right. In order to understand Rand's doctrine of self-interest, one must consider the theory of human rights that is basic to her ethics. Each man possesses certain basic rights by virtue of his nature, as a rational being. Thus, he has a right to further his life by his own thought and effort. he has a right to work, right to property, right to choose his own values and pursue them. He has a right to liberty and pursuit of happiness. All these rights are required for living his life as a rational being, but he has no right to encroach upon similar rights of others, viz., he has no right to murder, rob or enslave other men. Human beings may not only enjoy rights but also carry out their obligations towards others. Such obligations, for example, may arise if one has made a contractual agreement one is morally bound to keep. Similarly, one is morally bound to support one's children as they are her responsibility. However, right to life does not mean that others must provide you with the necessities of life. They have no such obligation towards you, and forcing them to do so will be a violation of their rights. Nothing can be called a right that requires for its implementation the non-voluntary participation of other human beings. Rational self-interest does not mean that you are free to do anything that serves your interests, especially that which violates others' rights. Rather, it consists of respecting rights of others and demanding that one's own rights be respected. Second, along with rights, one has obligations towards those situations which have been caused with her participation, but there would be no obligation for those situations which she did not cause. The general good theory. To the question of human conduct, one answer is given by utilitarianism, which has been discussed above. The answer is very simple: act so as to bring about the greatest good possible. Among the alternative actions available, one should choose the one that produces the maximum total good or the one that has the best total consequences. If, for example, you are aiming at producing happiness, then your act should be such as to create happiness for all. There is no doubt that exact calculations in this regard may be difficult, but we can have good approximation. Sometimes, it is difficult or even impossible to know which alternative will be the one which can cause maximum happiness or lessen the maximum unhappiness. In such situations, one should utilize the best information available at that time. Suppose one's father and a famous physician are trapped in a burning house and one has an alternative to save only one. The utilitarian's answer would be to save the physician, because if he is saved, she can save the life of some more people. Hence, more good would be done by saving the physician. It may happen that in spite of one's best judgment or intention her act may harm others. Suppose someone driving a car takes along a person and the car meets with an accident and the person dies. In such case, to say that death of the person would not have occurred had he not been helped. Can the act of helping here be treated as wrong? The utilitarian ethics can be stated very simply. The proposition that a certain act is right follows as a conclusion from the following two premises. 1. The act that will produce, on the basis of evidence available at the time, the greatest total good is right. This act will produce the greatest total good. Therefore, this act is right. 2. The second premise is that the consequence of an act is often difficult or even impossible to determine. This is because the relation between the cause and effect is extremely complex. What may happen, one never knows for certain. Nevertheless, utilitarianism has been challenged by philosophers in many ways. Let us consider some examples. 1. Suppose I make a promise to provide some services to you. Should I keep the promise only when I believe that doing so will produce the most good? Should I keep the promise because I made it? Suppose I as a doctor make a promise to meet you at 4 p.m. and just as I was getting ready to see you, an emergency case came which called for an immediate operation, avoiding which could cause fatal death to the patient. Obviously not keeping the promise in such situation would be the right thing. 2. This becomes especially pressing in cases of promises made that no one knew. For example, say two explorers are lost in the Arctic and there is enough food to keep only one of them alive. The first explorer expresses his willingness to die if the second makes a promise to rear up his children on his friend's behalf. Will the second man be justified when he returns home and declares the fact? No one would ever know that the promise was made. Since the friend cannot afford to educate or rear up both the families, his first duty would be to rear up his own children and to forget about the promise to the dying man. 3. A man ordinarily feels obliged to provide for one's own family and not his neighbor's family. What if, however, on a given occasion, he could do more good by helping the neighbor's family than by helping his own? Should he do it? Would he be equally obliged to do it as to help his own? 4. There is a habitual criminal. On several occasions he is brought to the court for conviction. But in the absence of proper evidence, every time, the criminal is set free. Suppose now for an alleged crime, he finally obtains a conviction. The judge comes upon definite information that the person has not committed the crime for which he is convicted. The fact that the person is innocent, this time, is known only to the judge and nobody else. What should the judge do, knowing fully well that if he is released he would commit crimes once again? It would be better for all if he is convicted, because if he is released he would commit more crimes and be a danger to the life and property of many. However, by being convicted this time, he would be paying for the crime that he has not committed at all. Rule-utilitarianism. So far we have been discussing the traditional version of utilitarianism, according to which one should perform only the act which has best consequences. This traditional version is also known by the name act utilitarianism. If we adopt this version for deciding the rightness of individual acts, there will be many cases, like the ones cited above, examples 1 to 4. Judging the worth of an act in terms of consequences of the individual act will either be not possible or it would result in a state of moral dilemma. To come out of this difficult situation, Rule-utilitarianism version of utilitarianism has been adopted. It holds that we should not judge the rightness of an act by its consequences, but by the consequences of adopting the rule under which the particular act falls. For example, one important rule in law is that a person, who is known to be innocent, should never be found guilty, see example 4 above. Sustaining the conviction of the man, even after we know that he is innocent, would clearly violate this rule. Whatever be the consequences for this particular conviction, the consequences of adopting any rule that permits conviction of someone who is innocent is very bad indeed. But again a question may be raised: how do we assess the goodness or worth of the rule itself? Consider the consequences of not having such a rule, and you can easily assess the worth of the rule. Finding the best rule, a rule whose adoption would have the best consequence, is often difficult. Mostly such rules will not be simple but complex. For example, can we adopt the rule, never take a human life, or never kill a person? In that case, what about killing in self-defense? In a battle, killing is considered to be good. The adoption of such a rule would result in the death of innocent and survival of thieves and murderers. A better rule in this regard could be, never initiate aggression against other human beings, or never kill except in self-defense. The point is that, adopt the best rule and stick to it without any exception. The best rule is that rule whose adoption results in the best consequences. Similarly, another example may be, never break a promise. This rule can be modified as never break a promise unless it was made in duress, or unless some significantly good result would be achieved or evil prevented by breaking it. Theories of conduct not based on consequences. According to utilitarianism, act utilitarianism or rule utilitarianism, what we should do and what we should not depends on the consequences. But do we think that every theory of human conduct depends only on the consequences of the act or of the rule? Are there no right-making features of the act? There are thinkers who hold that some acts may be good or bad, independent of the consequences of these acts. We should, therefore, consider not only the consequences, which lie in the future, but also the conditions under which the act was performed, which lie in the past. Following this line of thought, we can consider various types of moral obligations that the utilitarian does not sufficiently recognize. These are: 1. There are duties of gratitude to those who have helped us. For example, I owe a duty of gratitude to my parents but not to the physician as mentioned in an example given earlier, and to all those who have helped us in need. It is, therefore, Father, rather than the physician whom the son may rescue from the burning building. This duty is not based on probable future looking. Duties have personal character because of the special relations between those involved. 2. There are duties of fidelity, loyalty. I have made a promise. I must keep it except in situations where a bigger duty, more urgent and significant, comes in the way. This duty is also past-looking, for a past event, relation, and not based on probable consequences of keeping the promise. It is also personal, for the person to whom I made the promise, not just for anyone. 3. There are duties related to justice. In one sense, justice means equitable treatment to all, not equal treatment. It depends on the deservedness. If a judge, for example, sentences a stranger for full penalty but lets off another person for exactly the same offense, for political or other reasons, injustice is done. But if a school provides free ship, books and clothes to those students only who are poor but performers and not to others, who are well off or who do not perform well, it may be called justice. This is called social justice. Showing partiality is a clear example of injustice. If a judge sentences life imprisonment to everyone including himself, if he later commits such an offense, for violating minor traffic rules, the judge is doing injustice, not because he is partial in the deliverance of judgment, that he is certainly not, but because the nature of offense is not so severe as to sentence people for life imprisonment. A man deserves punishment because he has committed an offense, but the same should be proportionate to the offense committed. The utilitarianism theory of punishment is entirely future-looking. One should punish in order to, not because of. According to utilitarianism, punishment is justified because it may improve the offender, perhaps, teach him a lesson, so that he will not repeat his offense in future, b. deter other people from doing similar offenses, and c. protect the people, potential victims, from such offenders by isolating them from the rest of the society. The retributive view of punishment is that it should be administered simply because an offense has been committed, for which the offender deserves to be punished. Let us take the case cited in example 5, wherein a habitual criminal has been sentenced for a crime which he did not commit this time, though in the past he has committed many crimes, but in the absence of evidence, he could not be sentenced. The retribution would signify that the man should not be punished for the offense he has not committed. To punish him would be a clear example of injustice. He should not be punished even though the consequences of punishing him, in such a case, might be very good for the society, deserving for the act committed and not by future consequences of punishing. The theorist of rule-utilitarianism would say that he should not be punished. He would say that if an innocent man is punished, the consequences of such a rule would be disastrous for the society. It will make everyone feel insecure and also undermine the foundations of law. Both these parties, retributivist as well as rule-utilitarianism, would agree on the issue, though for different reasons. The retributivist has good reasons for criticizing and condemning the rule-utilitarianism in such cases. The fact is that man is innocent, and this alone is sufficient to justify that the man should not be punished. He should not be punished in any circumstance, not even to stop a crime or a riot.